Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Masters, a hole-by-hole history of America's Golf Classic, 3rd edition, by David Sowell, narrated by Barry Abrams. Introduction. 6 days before Christmas in 1933, it was announced that a new golf tournament would take place in the spring. The tournament would be held on a new course in Georgia, the Augusta National Golf Club, and it would be hosted by the club's founder, who happened to be the greatest golfer of all time, Bobby Jones. The game of golf has never been so enriched and has never been the same. Bobby Jones was one of the most celebrated figures in what was called the Golden Age of sports. From 1923 through 1929, he won 9 major golf titles. In 1930, he captured that era's Grand Slam by winning the British Amateur, the British Open, the United States Open, and the United States Amateur. Up until this incredible feat, no golfer had ever won more than 2 of these prestigious tournaments in a single year. In the fall of that year, after announcing his retirement from competition at the age of 28, Jones remained very much in the public eye. He signed on with Warner Brothers Studios to make golf instructional films that were shown in movie theaters across the country. The films were a huge success, allowing a whole generation of golfers to see his beautiful swing at actual speed and in slow motion. Jones had another endeavor he wanted to pursue, and that was to build what he called his dream course. In the spring of 1931, friends of Jones in Augusta, Georgia, suggested that he drive over from Atlanta, his hometown. The friends wanted him to look at a property, Fruitlands Nurseries, which was for sale. This 365-acre tract was once the site of an indigo plantation that had been purchased in 1857 by a Belgian baron named Louis Matthew Edward Berkmans. The baron, who was a horticulturist, and his son Prosper, a professional agronomist and horticulturist, had turned the old plantation into one of the South's finest commercial nurseries. When Jones came to the property to inspect it, he was driven down the impressive entranceway, Magnolia Lane, to the stately pre-Civil War manor house. He then walked around to the rear of the house and saw before him a beautiful canvas upon which to create his masterpiece. Stands of tall pines with flowers and shrubs, and vast stretches of open ground that ran down a long hillside toward a stream, Ray's Creek. A deal for the property was struck, and soon afterward the Augusta National Golf Club was formed. Jones was an exceptional achiever off the golf course as well. After he earned a degree in mechanical engineering at Georgia Tech in just 3 years, he received a B.S. degree from Harvard, where he had spent 2 years studying English literature. The son of a lawyer, Jones subsequently entered Emory University Law School in Atlanta. During his 2nd year at Emory, he passed the Georgia bar exam and became a lawyer. What made Jones a truly exceptional man, in addition to his academic accomplishments, was that he had also been blessed with an attribute often in short supply in the population: the gift of common sense. While he had an abundance of knowledge about what was required to make a golf hole truly outstanding, he knew that he would need first-rate support if he was to make his dream course the great layout he wanted it to be. One of the first steps Jones took after the Augusta National Golf Club was organized and he had been named its president was to engage the services of renowned Scottish golf course architect Alister Mackenzie. Jones had played Cypress Point on the Monterey Peninsula, one of the courses in the United States that Mackenzie had designed, and he had been deeply impressed. Another factor in Jones's selection of Mackenzie was that he wanted Augusta National to have the playing characteristics of the Scottish courses he had come to admire so much. Jones wanted the natural contours of the land to dictate the strategy of the holes. The fairways would be wide and quick. The fairway and greenside bunkers would be kept to a minimum, and the greens would be large, undulating, and fast. Another key player in the founding of Augusta National was Clifford Roberts, a Wall Street investment banker who handled the financing and operational details of the club. In a few short years, Roberts would display an as yet untapped talent, which was showing the world how to put on a first-class golf tournament. The course formally opened for play in January 1933. Later that year, the inner circle of the club decided that beginning in the spring of 1934, the club would play host to an annual invitational tournament in which the top players in golf would participate. Cliff Roberts wanted the event to be called the Masters, but Jones thought the name too presumptuous, so the event took the official name of the Augusta National Invitational. But a large number of sports writers had picked up on Roberts's preferred name, and they referred to the tournament as the Masters from the very beginning. In 1938, Jones finally agreed to change the tournament's name to the Masters. The rise of the Masters, the youngest by far of golf's 4 major tournaments, is one of the great stories in American sports. The game's other 3 major events, the British Open, the United States Open, and the Professional Golfers Association of America Championship, were first played in 1860, 1895, and 1916, respectively. During the first full week in April, when the tournament annually takes place, millions of Americans who ordinarily can go right on living, even if they confuse a 9-iron with scrap iron, suddenly become consumed with golf, golfers, and Augusta National. As for the millions of golfers and golf fans, it has been said there is a consciousness of the Masters in the air every day of the year. Because the Masters is the only one of professional golf's 4 major tournaments with a permanent home, the game's greatest players have played more holes of major championship golf at Augusta National than at any other course in the world. In the process, they have executed some of the game's greatest shots and have also on many occasions been humbled beyond belief. Each of the 18 holes on Bobby Jones's masterpiece is named for a plant or tree that adorns it, and they have all made their mark on what has been so aptly called the tournament like no other. This book will chronicle each of the individual holes' contributions to the excitement, pressure, heartbeat, and exhilaration that is the Masters. Hole number 1, par 4, 445 yards, tee olive. For 51 weeks of the year, the first tee at Augusta National is a serene and idyllic setting, but Thursday of Masters Week, and for the following 3 days, it becomes the center of the golf universe. Whether you are playing in your first Masters or your 21st, the first tee jitters here are like the tournament itself, as big as they get. When the players arrived for the 2006 Masters, they had to make an adjustment for the fact that the center of the golf universe had shifted slightly. The first tee had been moved back 10 yards, increasing the hole's distance from 435 to 445 yards. The change at the first hole was part of a package of changes made at Augusta National that also involved the lengthening and toughening of 5 other holes, 4, 7, 11, 15, and 17. This was the second time in 4 years there had been a host of changes at Augusta National. Before the 2002 Masters, 3 of the holes that were updated for the 2006 Masters, 1, 7, and 11, along with 8, 9, 10, 13, 14, and 18, had their tees pushed back in addition to other modifications. These changes were dictated by the increased length achieved by today's golfers, assisted greatly by their high-tech clubs and improved long-distance golf balls. As in 2002, the 2006 changes stirred up quite a bit of discussion and debate in the media, among the players, and among golf fans. Many believed this wonderful national treasure was being defiled. Others thought the changes were long overdue. As each hole's history will chronicle, the fact is the Augusta National Course has always been a work in progress, from the day it opened in 1933. Bobby Jones designed and oversaw a number of changes before his death in 1971. Masters champions Ben Hogan, Byron Nelson, and Jack Nicklaus are just a few of the professionals who have also participated in making changes to the course. In addition to the players, noted golf course architects Perry Maxwell, George Fazio, Robert Trent Jones, and Tom Fazio, who oversaw the 2002 and 2006 changes, have assisted in designing and implementing improvements to Jones and Mackenzie's original masterpiece. There was another change at the Masters in 2002 that was universally hailed, and it was one for which millions of golf fans had been clamoring for years: televising the play on the front nine during the final 2 rounds. Masters officials had long feared that televising the front nine would dilute the quality of the telecast, but the demands from the Masters faithful were too great to be ignored. The change called for almost all of the leaders' play to be covered on Saturday. On Sunday, coverage would start an hour earlier and show the leaders teeing off at the first hole. The first hole is a very demanding dogleg right uphill par 4, and it has experienced its share of changes over the years. For starters, it was originally the 10th hole when the club opened in 1933. The original layout posed a problem in winter because the first 3 holes were set on the lowest part of the course. In colder months, these holes were often covered by frost during the early morning hours, which delayed play. To alleviate this problem, the nines were reversed after the first Masters in 1934. Right off the bat, the first shot at the first hole presents the player with the risk versus reward scenario Jones loved to have on a hole. On this hole, the reward has always been for a drive that clears the large bunker on the right side of the fairway at the bend of the dogleg. If the shot is successful, the player has an ideal approach to the green with a short iron. If the shot comes up short, the player has what can be a very challenging second shot from the sand. The hole's distance has been lengthened over the years from its original 400 yards to keep the fairway bunker in play. In 1982, Masters officials decided to lengthen the hole by 10 yards and not tell the players about the increased length. The players picked up on the covert change in the practice round, when their drives began filling up the fairway bunker. The added distance certainly affected the scoring on the hole that year. The number of birdies dropped by almost 40%, and bogeys increased by more than 30%. There has always been one element that can make this shot a very risky proposition or a breeze, and that is the wind conditions. If the wind is at the player's back, he can really let one ride, but if it is in his face, he generally opts to take the safe route and play to the left center of the fairway to avoid the bunker. It used to be that if a player pulled his tee shot too far to the left, he was not overly concerned. Even if the ball rolled into the adjacent fairway of the 9th hole, he would still have a clear approach to the green. However, this avenue to the green has been taken away with the addition of more pine trees up that side of the fairway. The green is protected by a bunker on the left side, which was a 1951 addition. The putting surface is very undulating. It has a ridge on the back section that can make things very interesting if a player is long with his approach and has a lengthy putt or chip back down to the hole. This green has an abundance of subtle breaks that have always produced a very high number of missed putts from the 4 and 5 foot range. The pin is usually tucked behind the bunker once in an early round and in the final round. The locations of the pin in the other 2 rounds are typically right center and front right. In the 2001 Masters, the first had ranked as the second most difficult hole on the course. Its Tiger Woods ranking was also pretty high. Before the 2002 Masters, Woods had made only 1 birdie in 26 attempts at the hole. The changes made to the first prior to the 2002 Masters were increasing the length from a listed 410 yards to 435 yards, and extending the fairway bunker an additional 25 yards toward the green. These changes added an additional 50 yards to the carry a drive would need to clear the fairway bunker. Many players have encountered problems before they have even had a chance to place a tee in the ground at the first hole. In one of the Masters in the late 1960s, Bert Yancey got to the course with plenty of time to warm up and get ready for his opening round, but his caddy was nowhere to be found. Yancey had made what was, in hindsight, a big mistake. He had allowed the young man who had been assigned to him by the Augusta National caddy master to borrow his car the previous evening, and to make matters worse, his clubs were in the trunk. Yancey was practically hysterical. The assistant caddy master was hurriedly dispatched to locate the missing young man. He played a hunch and soon found the caddy and the vehicle at a brothel just a few miles from the club. He was able to get the clubs to Yancey in time for him to make his appointment at the first tee with a new caddy. In 1937, Harry Cooper, whose nickname was Hard Luck, was tied with the eventual winner Byron Nelson after the third round. The caddy who had worked so effectively with Cooper for 54 holes did not show up for the final round. Forced to use a replacement, Hard Luck shot his worst round of the tournament, a 74, to finish in third place, 4 strokes off the pace. Herman Kaiser, the surprise leader after the first 2 rounds in 1946 and the eventual winner, was enjoying a relaxing lunch in the clubhouse an hour before what he thought was his scheduled tee time until Henry Picard charged into the dining area. Picard, the 1938 Masters champion, frantically told Kaiser that he had just been called to the first tee. Kaiser raced out to the first tee without the benefit of any practice. Kaiser parred the hole and went on to post his third straight subpar round. Jimmy DeMeritt held the lead after the first 3 rounds in 1947, and he opted not to go to the practice range before the final round. Not because he didn't want to or need to, he just wasn't in any condition to swing a club. DeMeritt had been out partying the night before, and he was still feeling the effects of overconsumption of alcohol. Instead of practicing, he found a quiet, shady spot off the 10th fairway to use as his personal detoxification area until he was called to the tee. DeMeritt's tee shot at the first that day was far from spectacular. He slapped it out into some brush on the right side of the fairway. On his second shot, he managed to slice his ball around a group of pines onto the front of the green and then 2-putted for his par. After a bogey at the second, DeMeritt settled down and finished the round at a 1-under par 71 and won the tournament by 2 strokes. Before Sam Snead reached the first tee in his first Masters in 1937, he was advised he was being assessed a penalty. It wasn't a stroke penalty, but a financial one. His employer, the Greenbrier Resort at White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, had advised him that he would be docked $10 a week's pay for being away from his duties as the resort's golf professional to play in the Masters. Snead's first appearance at Augusta did not get off to a good start, as he made bogey on his first hole. Snead finished the day at 4 over par, 76. He played the second round at even par and the third round at 1 under. Snead stood the chance of easily recouping his financial penalty, but he ballooned to a 7 over par 79 in the last round and finished 5 strokes out of the money, which in that year's tournament was paid to only the top 10 finishers. In spite of the fact that this was his 22nd Masters, Snead was a little too eager when it came time for him to tee off in the first round in 1961. He did not allow enough time for the pairing that had teed off ahead of him to clear the landing area. Snead's tee shot almost struck one of them, and it was not just anyone. It was an individual who at that time probably had the most nicknames of any player in the field. Those that can be said are Tantrum Tommy, Terrible Tommy, and Tempestuous Tommy. Snead had nearly struck the living legend of short fuses, Tommy Bolt. Bolt let loose with a verbal tirade back at Snead that almost peeled the bark off some of the pines lining the fairway. Bolt's verbal wrath must have still been ringing in Snead's ears when he got to the green, because he missed a 2-footer for his par. Arnold Palmer received a rousing welcome ovation from the gallery when he walked onto the first tee for the opening round in 1968. A few moments later, Masters officials told him that the ball he was playing was not welcome, and he would have to use another brand. This was particularly stinging to Palmer because the brand of the ball he was playing was the Arnold Palmer. Prior to the tournament, the United States Golf Association had ruled that the ball was illegal because it did not meet its specifications. After that ruling, Palmer's company had made the changes required for compliance and had been advised by the USGA the balls were now legal. When Palmer showed up at the first tee, however, his ball was one of 19 on a list of banned balls Masters officials had prepared. Palmer played his round with balls from two competing brands, Titleist and Maxfly, and shot an even par 72. By the start of the second day, the Masters officials were made aware that Palmer's ball was in fact now legal, and he used it in the second round. He may have wished he had played with the other two brands again, because he shot a 79 and missed the cut for the first time in his Masters career. Two competitors who had to tee off at the first hole under very difficult personal situations were Byron Nelson and Jack Nicklaus, and both went on to win the tournament. In Nelson's case, he had arrived at the first tee for his playoff with Ben Hogan in 1942 after a night of virtually no sleep. Nelson had a long history of chronic stomach trouble. During the night before, he had experienced one of his worst bouts ever with the problem, describing his stomach as churning like a washing machine. When Hogan saw how ill Nelson looked that morning, he offered to delay the playoff until the afternoon, but Nelson insisted they tee off that morning as originally scheduled. Nelson's tee shot at the first was probably the worst of his career. It could almost be defined as a shank. The ball shot out to the extreme right, flew over a concession stand, ricocheted off a pine tree, and came to rest under a little evergreen tree. His ball's position prevented him from addressing the ball as a right-handed player. He had to become a switch hitter and execute his next stroke with a left-handed stance. He used a putter and punched it back into play. His next shot flew over the green, and he took 3 more strokes to get down and started the day with a double bogey 6. Nelson would take several holes to recover from his stomach problem, and then make a remarkable comeback to defeat Hogan. Nelson's physical problem would have to be considered mild in comparison to the emotional issues Jack Nicklaus was dealing with when he stepped onto the first tee for the first round in 1966. The day before, 4 of Nicklaus's Columbus, Ohio friends were killed when their private plane crashed in Tennessee while en route to Augusta. After a woefully hooked tee shot that ended up in the 9th fairway, and an approach shot that left him almost 40 feet from the pin, Nicklaus somehow managed to find a way to deal with the tragic events of the previous 24 hours. He drained the putt for an opening birdie. It would take him an extra day, but Nicklaus would go on to claim the 3rd of his 6 Masters titles in an 18-hole, 3-way playoff with Gabe Brewer and Tommy Jacobs. Unlike golf's other 3 major championships, the Masters is strictly an invitation tournament sponsored by a private organization, the Augusta National Club. The club sets the qualifications for receiving an invitation. Doug Sanders probably put it best from a player's perspective about being invited to Augusta when he said, "If you don't get an invitation to the Masters, it is like being out of the world for a week." Like the course itself, the criteria for qualifying for an invitation have gone through many changes over the years. Being a winner or a top finisher in a major championship has always been a means of qualifying. For a number of years, winning a Professional Golfers Association PGA Tour event has automatically qualified a player. Also, at one time, the prior Masters champions selected one player by ballot from a list of players who were not otherwise qualified. The best way for a player to ensure he is in the field each year is to win the Masters, because prior champions are granted a lifetime invitation. Besides being a former Masters champion or qualifying through a major championship, the other 2 primary means of qualifying are by being in the top 50 in the world golf rankings or being in the top 40 money winners on the PGA Tour from the previous year. Also, The top 16 finishers from the previous year's Masters are invited back the next year. To give the tournament an international flavor, the invitation committee has often issued special invitations to foreign players. In 1957, Cliff Roberts received a letter from a man in Johannesburg, South Africa, seeking an invitation for his 22-year-old son. The man stated that his son was a great admirer of Bobby Jones and always had an ambition to play in the Masters. He said his son did not have the money for the trip, but if he were extended an invitation, he would pass the hat around among friends to get the necessary funds. The letter moved Roberts, although the man's son did not have an especially strong record. Roberts took up the matter with the committee, and it voted to extend the young man an invitation. Roberts then wired the father and advised him to go ahead and pass the hat because an invitation was on the way. Gary Player was the young man they were passing the hat for in Johannesburg, and in that 1957 Masters, he would finish in a very respectable 25th place. In 1961, Player would win his first of 3 green jackets. The first hole was crucial for Player in that one-stroke victory, as he made birdies here in 3 out of the 4 rounds. Since the incorporation of the world rankings into the invitation criteria, these special invitations have become less numerous. Recent recipients of a special invitation have been Ryo Ishikawa of Japan in 2013 and Shubhankar Sharma of India in 2018. The most interest in a player making his first appearance at the first tee was in 1975, when Lee Elder became the first black athlete to play in the Masters. In the late 1960s, a controversy began brewing over the fact that a black player had never qualified for the Masters, and there were increasing calls that a special invitation be issued. In March 1973, a group of 18 congressmen wrote Cliff Roberts and requested that a special invitation be extended to Elder. This was 2 years after the death of Bobby Jones. Roberts was now solely in charge of Augusta National and the Masters. Roberts declined the calls for a special invitation, stating that when a black player did qualify, he would by all means be extended an invitation. The calls for the special invitation continued after the 1973 Masters, but Roberts remained fixed on his position. The controversy ended when Elder qualified for the 1975 Masters by winning a PGA Tour event and received his invitation as Roberts had stated he would. When Elder stepped onto the first tee that morning, a light rain was falling, but the fairway was lined with spectators from tee to green. Elder seemed very relaxed on the tee. He teed up his ball and smoothly launched his first drive. It split the fairway. He put his second shot safely on the green and two-putted for a routine par. He picked up his first Masters birdie on the second hole and finished the day with a 74. He didn't make the cut that year, but he would play in 6 more Masters. His best finish would be 17th place in 1979. It is often hard to judge what kind of round a player is going to have by his score at the first hole. In the third round in 1986, Nick Price's drive did not clear the bunker. His shot from the sand still left him almost 80 yards to the green. He hit a wedge to within about 20 feet and two-putted for bogey. Price then went on a tear, recording 10 birdies over the remaining 17 holes to shoot a 9-under par 63. This broke the single-round record for the Masters of 64, which had been established by Lloyd Mangrum in 1940. When he started his last round in 1990, Nick Faldo had probably pushed far back in his memory the double bogey 6 he had had at the first hole in the third round in 1989. Faldo had eventually fought his way back from that disaster. He was never in the lead outright in that tournament, but by the time he had putted out on the 72nd hole, he had a share of it. Faldo went on to win his first green jacket in a sudden death playoff with Scott Hoke. Now a year and 1 day later, Faldo was coming off a splendid third round of 66 and was just 2 strokes behind leader Raymond Floyd. Faldo would have normally played a draw from right to left. On this day there was a crosswind blowing from left to right, however, which made him reluctant to attempt that shot. He decided instead to play his shot to the left center of the fairway and let the wind bring it back to the landing area. The shot did not come off as he had planned, and he...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?